Welcome. Welcome to session on functions in C. Functions in C language. We already discussed about modularity, and we also discussed that modularity is implemented in C language using functions. And what happens when a function is invoked and why stack is required. If you want to use functions, and when you have to use functions, when it's better to avoid. In this session, we go deep into the functions. We'll discuss how the C language actually supports the functions. How the C language supports functions. What is the function prototype? What is the signature of the function? Those things we will discuss in this class, in this session. Defining a function. In C language, modularity is implemented using functions. A function is a kind of abstraction. If you remember the definition of abstraction, abstraction is taking the essential characteristics for the time being and neglecting the other things. Taking the essential characteristics for the time being and neglecting the other things. So while using a function, we'll only concentrate on the task to be performed. We don't bother about other tasks actually. We'll consider one task or at least similar tasks, and then we will write the function. So we don't bother about other tasks that are to be performed for solving the problem. So a function is a kind of abstraction. Function differentiates interface and implementation. What exactly is the interface and what is implementation? This is a very important point. So interface is what is visible to the outside world. Implementation is how the task is actually achieved. That means actually it refers to the code. Implementation refers to the code. So interface refers to what is visible to the world. That means how to invoke the function. How do you invoke the function? When do you invoke the function? When you will be able to invoke the function. So when you know the name of the function, when you know the type and number of the parameters that are to be passed, then you can invoke the function. So function differentiates this interface, what is visible to the outside world, and implementation, which is the code. Function interface is the function declaration, and function implementation is the code of the function. How to declare the function, we'll see. Function interface is rarely changed. That is the advantage. That is the advantage of actually differentiating interface and implementation. Function interface is rarely changed, but function implementation may be changed in order to improve its efficiency. The code may be changed, but what is visible to the outside world is not changed. Function declaration provides information to the compiler, whereas function definition shows how the task for which it is designed is achieved through code. So declaration provides information to the compiler. The function has two parts, header and the body. Function has two parts, the header and the body. So the header is nothing but the name of the function, the parameters, return type, etc. The syntax, actual syntax we will see, parameters, etc. So this can be considered as header, and code means, body means actually the code. Body means code. So this is header part actually, and this is the body part. This is the body part. Header part, and then this is the body part. This is the body part. In the header part, we will declare the function, and in the body part, we will define the function. So function has two things, declaration and definition. The header part we declare, in the body part we define. We will write the actual code. Declaration provides information about the function, its return type, what the function returns. Suppose in the case of adding two numbers, the function returns the sum of the two numbers. So what is the return type? Now what is the type of the data type of the return value? Name of the function, the type and number of the arguments. This is sometimes called as signature. This point we already discussed. The body of the function contains the actual code which produces the desired result. So the actual code. So it is always necessary to differentiate declaration and definition. This enables us to change the definition, keeping declaration intact. Again, you can map it to interface and implementation. Declaration is interface, definition is implementation. Declaration, interface, definition, implementation. So this is the general syntax. You have to remember it. By practice, you are going to remember. Return type, the return type is there. Function name is there. Return type is there. Return type. What is that data type of the value the function is returning? What is the data type of the value the function is returning? Again, these data types can be basic data types, derived data types, user defined data types. Okay, return type. Next, function name, which is a valid identifier. So it can be anything, it can be xp, or it can be some appropriate name, something like sum of two numbers, like that. Function name is a valid identifier, and then the arguments or the parameters. The parameters are arguments. The parameters are arguments. The parameters are arguments. So we'll use the term parameters. We will use the term parameters. That is more appropriate. More appropriate. So you will have a list of parameters. You will have a list of parameters. So separated by commas. Separated by commas. List of parameters separated by commas. And regarding each parameter, there will be two things: type of the parameter and the name of the parameter. Here we have used this arg1. It's better you use param1, param2, like that, indicating that they are the parameters. They are the parameters. Param1, param2, like that. You can use anything. It not be param1 or something like that. But anyhow, the data type of the parameter and then the parameter name. Again, parameter name is a valid identifier. Data type is nothing but the basic data types are like int, char, etc., or user defined data types are the derived data types. So they are separated by commas. So within the function, that means the function body is indicated by this opening and closing flower brackets. So there will be declarations and statements. There will be declarations and statements. So the code, actual code of the function is present here. The part of the function without body is called as function declaration. Function declaration. If you don't write any code, it can be called as a declaration. Declaration. Suppose if you consider here, this part is nothing but the function declaration. Okay, this part is the function declaration. Definition means everything including this. So this is the definition. So declaration, if you consider only this thing, it is called as declaration. So declaration followed by the code within this flower brackets is definition. In C, a function has to be declared before its first use. So we discussed that a function will be invoked or called, but if you want to invoke it, it has to be declared, similar to the variable. So in C, before you use any variable, it has to be declared. Similarly, if you want to use a function, then it has to be declared first. When the function is called, control is transferred to that function, code of the function is executed, and the control is transferred to a statement immediately after the function call statement. So this was demonstrated in the previous session. So when a function is called, control is transferred to that function, control goes to that function, code of that function will be executed, and the control is transferred back again to the statement immediately after the function call statement. So it will be a function call. So to the next statement, the control will be transferred. Function can have parameters, but they are not mandatory. That means a function can have no parameters. A function can exist without parameters. When the function has parameters, we have to pass appropriate arguments. We will see what exactly the relation between parameters and arguments. Okay. The type of the parameter should match with the type of the corresponding argument. In C, matching is based on the position. You may use the same name for both argument and parameter, but it's not mandatory. The parameters are local to the function. That means I will try to demonstrate. Say this is, let us assume this is main function. This is the main function, or it can be any other function also. Okay. Let me just write. I cannot write in sequence here. This tool doesn't permit it. Okay. Now within the function you have say some function 1. Function 1 is there. So I will write here say AB for convenience. What is this AB? We will see. And say you have this function 1. So say here some integer x, integer y, something like this, and you have again this opening flower bracket and closing flower bracket, which contains the actual code of the function. Now if you consider this one, let us assume that this function is for calculating the sum of the two numbers. In that case, it will be integer, and here also you should have some variable which is of type integer, which stores the return value. Okay, C equal to function 1 of AB. So if you consider this one, this is the prototype or signature. You can see here the return type. The return type. What is the type of the value the function is going to return? Because here we are assuming that this function calculates the sum of the two numbers, and we are considering integer numbers. So the sum of the two integers is integer. So it is going to return the integer. Now how it returns, that we'll see. There is a return statement that the syntax we are going to see, but it is going to return the integer. So in the declaration part, you have to specify that the return type is integer, and this is the function name, say function 1, and here you can see this x and y are the parameters. So x and y are the parameters. What are they? Parameters. And AB are actually arguments. AB are called as arguments. So these are parameters, these are arguments. Okay, but in some books, in different contexts, it may be different. It may be different. In some books, these x and y are called as formal parameters, and this AB will be called as actual parameters. AB actual parameters, x and y formal parameters. So the return type, function name, and then the parameters. X and y here are the parameters. You can see that they are separated by commas, and type, return type, the data type of x is int, so int x, comma, data type of y is also int, so int y. Okay, now these are the arguments, and you are invoking the function. So whenever you invoke the function, so as soon as this statement is executed, control goes here, this code, entire code will be executed. This entire code will be executed. After executing the code, okay, after executing the code, so control comes here. This is the path that is taken. So because here you are passing a and b, and because here the x and y are integers, so the type of a and b should also be integer. The type of the parameter should match with the type of the corresponding argument. So here AB should also be of type integer. You can have values called as A equal to some 10, B equal to 20, and here you can write AB. So they are integers. Directly you can pass the values also. Here instead of A and B, you can write 10, 20 also. You may use the same name for both argument and parameter, but it is not mandatory. That means here instead of x and y, here you have x and y, so you can convert this to also x and y. This can be written as function 1 xy. But point to be noted is, whether you use xy here or not, AB are different from xy. They are just mapping. That means A value will be transferred to C, B value will be transferred to Y, but AB are different. Even if you write xy here, this xy will be different from this xy. That point you remember. And parameters are local to the function. That means into x, into y are there. So this x and y you can make use of within this body of the function. So outside some other function, say function 2 is there, you cannot use same x and y. That means they will be referring to some other locations. Now what exactly happens when you invoke a function like this, we will see. But these x and y you can use here. So you cannot use the x and y within this one or in some other function. You can use, but this xy will be different from the xy which you are using here, xy which you are using here. Function may return a value or just control. So function may return a value or just control. Until now we have discussed that control is transferred, but a function can return only one value. And if a function returns a value, then there should be a variable on the left hand side, to capture the value that is written. The data type should match. So we discussed it. C is the variable that is capable of storing the integer that is written by the function. It should include one or more return statements in order to return a value to the calling portion of the program, and the format of the return statement is return expression. Return followed by expression. This return is a keyword, you have to use as it is, you cannot change it. And expression, that means the evaluation of the expression will result in a value. Say it can be a plus b or 10 plus 20, something like that, or it can be just simply 10, or it can be simply a, depending on what it is returning. The expression is evaluated and the value is written. And C is a special type called void. Note this point. C uses a special type called as void to indicate that the function doesn't return anything. So when the function doesn't return anything, the return type will be indicated as void. In that case, there will not be any left hand variable, or there will not be any variable on the left hand side if the function returns void. In C, there is one mandatory function called main. So main is mandatory. The execution of any program starts with main. Any function you write is directly or indirectly associated with the main. That is, at least one of the many functions you create should be invoked by main, otherwise the code becomes unreachable. That means, why do you write the functions? Because you want to make use of the services of that function, whatever may be the service. So within the main there will be function invocations. When you write only one function, definitely within the main you invoke that function. But when you write multiple functions, so from the main you will invoke at least one of those functions, and one function may invoke other functions also. That means main can invoke different functions, or the individual functions also can invoke other functions, but that individual functions cannot actually invoke main. So main starts executing whenever you run the program. So it is already executing. Note that even the main function can have parameters, and it also may return a value. Those parameters are called as command line arguments. We will see this in the last module, command line arguments. But until now we have discussed that main has no parameters. What we discussed? We discussed it like this, okay, empty parenthesis, but here you can write the parameters also. Those parameters are actually called as command line arguments. Now what are these command line arguments? We will discuss later. Command line arguments. Main can have parameters. That point you remember. So general format of a C program with functions. You can see here return type 1, function 1, parameter set 1, and then some code. Return type 2, function 2, parameter set 1. Like this, you have different functions, function 1, function 2, and then function n. So the main can be written with a void or integer, or you can avoid both also. It depends on the compiler. Main usually empty parentheses, otherwise you can pass command line arguments. But from this one, you will be invoking the functions. At least one of these functions, function 1, function 2 or function n, has to be invoked. Function 1 can invoke function 2, function n can invoke function 2 and function 1, etc., etc. But these functions cannot invoke main. That is the restriction. In the above, definition of functions. Definition means where you write the code. Here you can see these flower brackets. Within these flower brackets, you can write code. 10 lines, 20 lines, whatever it be. Okay. Definition of functions come in the above. Definition of functions come before the main function. That means first functions are defined. So after that you are writing the main. But we can just write the declaration of the function before main function, and later we can write the function definitions like this here. So function declarations you can just write. That means actually there will not be any flower brackets and then the code here. This will not be there. So this will not be there, but just there will be semicolon. Okay. If there is semicolon here, it is called as declaration. If you have flower brackets in the code, it is called as function definition. Function definition. Okay. So we can write the function declarations instead of function definition, and then they define the functions after the main also. But at least declaration is essential. Declaration is essential. So mind your own business, do your function. Thank you.